The first thing I noticed was that my key wouldn't turn. I tried it twice, then a third time, because my brain apparently preferred believing a 4-year-old lock had suddenly broken to believing my parents had changed it while I was at work. Then I saw the 6 cardboard boxes lined up against the porch railing. 2 suitcases sat beside them, along with an old laptop bag and a grocery sack stuffed with shoes. On the front door, held in place with blue painter's tape, was a piece of my mother's stationery. 11 words were written across it in her neat handwriting. "Derek needs the room more than you do. Will explain later." I stood there in my work clothes with my purse still over my shoulder, staring at that note while a neighbor across the street pretended not to watch me. At 31 years old, I had just been kicked out of my parents' house without a conversation, and apparently my older brother already had more claim to my bedroom than I did. The strange part was that I had seen Derek's truck in the driveway that morning. I'd left just before 8, running late for work, and barely thought about it. Derek came by all the time. My mother was always feeding him, lending him something, helping him with some problem that had become an emergency by the time it reached her. But now I looked at the boxes again and understood that his truck hadn't been there for breakfast. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. It rang 6 times before voicemail picked up. "Mom, I'm outside. My key doesn't work. Why are my things on the porch?" I ended the call and immediately called my father. Same result. I texted both of them, "Where are you? What is going on?" Then I waited. Nothing. I took pictures of the boxes, the door, the note, and the lock. I didn't know why I was documenting it. Maybe because something about the whole scene felt so unreal that I needed proof it was actually happening. My name is Tessa Marlowe. At the time, I worked as a procurement coordinator for a commercial interiors company, which meant I spent most of my days comparing quotes, tracking orders, catching billing mistakes, and making sure people delivered what they had promised. I was very good at asking questions at work. With my family, I was much worse. I had moved back into my parents' house almost 4 years earlier when my dad's work hours dropped and their finances got tight. The arrangement had made sense for everyone. I would use my old bedroom, save some money, and contribute $150 a month toward household expenses. My mother called it temporary teamwork. I never asked for receipts. I never demanded to know which dollar paid which bill. They were my parents. If Mom said the roof repair had cost more than expected, I helped. If she said utilities had jumped, I sent extra. And whenever Derek needed something, I tried not to keep score. He was 35, 4 years older than me, and somehow every difficult season in his life came with a reason everyone else needed to adjust. A client hadn't paid him. His car needed repairs. His lease went up. His freelance work had slowed. There was always something. Growing up, Mom used to describe Derek as sensitive and me as capable. I used to like that word. Capable sounded strong. Standing on that porch, I began wondering whether it had always meant something else. My mother didn't answer my second call. My father didn't answer his second either. I loaded the smaller boxes into my car because leaving them outside felt worse than admitting I had nowhere to take them. The larger ones barely fit in the trunk. I called again from the driver's seat, then again 15 minutes later. By 7:30 I had called 5 times. By 8:15, my texts all showed delivered, no replies. I started typing a long message about how humiliating this was, how they couldn't possibly think this was normal, how I had paid to live in that house every month for years. I deleted it before sending. At 9, I called my friend Priya. She answered before the second ring. "Hey, what's wrong?" That almost broke me more than the unanswered calls had. I told her I was sitting in my car, with most of my life packed behind me, and I didn't know where my parents were. She didn't ask whether I had done something to deserve it. She didn't tell me to calm down. She said, "Come here. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." "I don't want to just leave," I said. "Tess, they changed the locks. Maybe they're coming back to explain." There was a pause. "Then they know your number." I looked back at the house. No lights, no movement. Just that piece of paper still taped to the door like a notice left for a delivery driver. I made call number 9 before driving away. Number 10 at a red light 3 blocks from Pryor's building. 11 from her parking lot. I carried one suitcase upstairs, sat on the edge of her couch, and made the 12th call at 11:47 p.m. My mother's voicemail answered again. This time I didn't leave a message. I just listened to the beep, then ended the call. Pryor came out of her bedroom wearing sweatpants and handed me a glass of water. "You going to call again?" she asked. I stared at my phone. 12 calls. 12 chances to answer one basic question. 12 chances for either of my parents to say, "We're sorry. Here's what happened. Let's talk." I turned my phone face down. "No?" Saying it felt strange. Small, but strange. "I'm done calling tonight." Priya sat across from me. "Good." Then she glanced at the boxes stacked beside her wall. "Do you still pay them every month?" I looked up. "What? For the house?" "Yeah, $11.50. It comes out automatically." Even now, I almost laughed, because the question sounded ridiculous. Of course not. Except I had no idea whether the transfer had already been scheduled. I reached for my phone again, but before I could open my banking app, a message appeared from my cousin Rachel. I hadn't told her anything. I opened it. "Hey, heard Derek and Lauren are moving into your parents' place this weekend. Thought you knew. Hope everything's okay." I read it twice, then a third time this weekend. Not maybe, not temporarily. Not some panicked decision my parents had made that afternoon. People outside the house already knew. I looked over at Pryor. "They planned this." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I opened my banking app. Under scheduled activity was the same automatic transfer that had gone out every month for years. 450. 3 days from now. My parents had changed the locks. They had packed my belongings. They had given my room to Derek. And unless I did something, they were still going to get my money right on schedule. The next morning, I woke up on Pryor's couch with my neck bent at an angle and one shoe still on. For a few seconds, I forgot why I was there. Then I saw the boxes stacked against her wall and remembered everything at once. I didn't call my parents. That was the first thing I did differently. Instead, I opened my banking app and stared at the scheduled 450 transfer. It was still there, set to leave my account in 3 days. My thumb hovered over the screen longer than I expected. Part of me kept doing the old math. I had lived at home for most of the month. I had used electricity, water, groceries. Maybe cancelling the whole amount was unfair. Maybe I should let this payment go through and sort everything out later. Praya walked into the kitchen while I was still staring at my phone. "You look like you're trying to defuse something." I turned the screen toward her. "My house payment." She read the amount. "Can they lock you out and still expect that? It's not technically rent." "Okay." She poured coffee. "Are you paying to live somewhere you're not allowed to enter?" I hated how simple the question sounded. It helped with the mortgage and bills. That wasn't my question. I looked back at the transfer. For years, my mother had called the money my contribution. That word had always made me feel useful. Responsible, included, but sitting there with yesterday's clothes still on, it suddenly felt important that contribution meant voluntary. I tapped the transfer and selected pause. Not cancel, not yet, just pause. A confirmation message appeared. Scheduled payment paused. I expected guilt immediately. What I felt instead was relief, small but real. "I need the rest of my stuff," I said. Pryor nodded toward my laptop, then asked for it in writing. My first instinct was to text Mom another paragraph. I had already drafted half of one before I stopped. I deleted it and opened my email instead. I wrote down exactly what I needed access to collect the belongings still inside the house. Confirmation that my mail and personal documents would not be opened or moved, and an explanation for why my access had been revoked without notice. I reread the message twice before sending it. No accusations, no insults, no begging, just questions. My mother replied 9 minutes later. That alone told me something. She had ignored 12 calls the night before, but the moment I stopped calling and put everything in writing, she suddenly had time. Her email said Derek and Lauren were going through a difficult financial transition and needed stability while they figured out their next step. Derek had lost a major client, and his freelance income had dropped sharply. Their lease was ending, and renewing it would cost more than they could manage. None of that was impossible. In fact, it sounded exactly like Derek. He had worked freelance for years, mostly doing branding and marketing projects, and his income had always been unpredictable. Some months he did great. Other months he borrowed money. What bothered me was the next sentence. You have always been the adaptable one, and we believed you would understand that Derek has fewer options right now. I read that line 3 times. Adaptable. There it was again. The family compliment that always seemed to arrive right before I was expected to absorb something someone else couldn't handle. I called her once. This time she answered. Hi, Tessa. Her voice was calm, too calm. Why did helping Derek require changing the locks on me? A pause. We didn't want a confrontation, so you thought coming home to my things outside would be less confrontational. You're upset right now. Yes. And I understand that. Do you? Another pause. Derek needs stability. You have a steady job. You have savings. You're in a much better position to adjust. That doesn't answer my question. Not everything has to be turned into a moral argument. I leaned back against Praya's kitchen counter and closed my eyes. Am I still supposed to send you the $11.50 every month? Silence. Not long, maybe 2 seconds. But it was enough. We can talk about finances when everyone is calmer, she said. No, I'm asking now. Tessa, your father and I have bills whether you're angry with us or not. There it was. So yes, I said we'll discuss it. You had time to discuss my bedroom without me, she exhaled sharply. I'm not doing this over the phone. You already did it without the phone. She ended the call a minute later after telling me I could collect more of my belongings the following afternoon. I put the phone down and stood there staring at nothing. Praya had stayed far enough away to pretend she wasn't listening, but when I looked over, she raised one eyebrow. How'd that go? Apparently I'm adaptable. Sounds expensive. I almost smiled. At lunch, my father called. For half a second, seeing his name made me hopeful. Dad had always been easier than Mom. Not exactly stronger, but quieter. I used to think quieter meant fairer. I answered immediately. Hey, your mother says you two had words? She changed the locks. I know. That stopped me. You knew. Tess. Listen, nobody is trying to hurt you. Did you know before yesterday? He hesitated. We knew Derek needed somewhere to go. That's not what I asked. I knew we were making some changes. I pressed my lips together. Did you know my belongings were going on the porch? Your mother handled the move. That answer told me almost as much as a yes. Dad, am I expected to keep paying $1,150 a month? He went quiet. Well, work something out. What does that mean? It means you don't have to turn everything into a fight. I'm not fighting. I'm asking whether I'm supposed to pay for a house I'm not allowed to enter. You lived there for years at a lot less than market rent. So that's a yes. Tessa. He sounded tired now. Your brother's in a tough spot. We're trying to help him. You're doing well. You've always been the one we didn't have to worry about. I used to love hearing that. This time it landed differently. Maybe that's the problem, I said. What does that mean? Nothing. I'll get my things tomorrow. I ended the call before he could tell me to calm down. For the rest of the afternoon, I tried to work. Normally I could disappear into purchase orders and vendor spreadsheets for hours, but every few minutes I caught myself thinking about the word contribution. By 4:30, I had almost convinced myself I was overreacting. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. Your father says you stopped the house transfer. Please fix that tonight. We have automatic payments coming out this week. I stared at the message. Not, where are you staying? Not, did you sleep okay? Not even, let's talk. She had noticed the money before she had acknowledged what she'd done to me. I typed, I'll discuss money after I retrieve the rest of my belongings. Her answer came immediately. Don't be petty. This affects everyone. I read that one slowly. Maybe that was the first moment the situation stopped feeling like a family argument and started feeling like something else. Because apparently changing my locks affected only me. Giving away my room affected only me. Ignoring 12 calls affected only me. But stopping my own payment, suddenly that affected everyone. I put my phone face down on my desk and went back to work. An hour later, another message arrived. Mom said I could come by the next day between 4 and 6. 2 hours. That was the window I had been given to retrieve the rest of my life from a house I was still expected to help pay for. The next afternoon, I pulled into my parents' driveway at 4:07 and almost kept driving. Derek's truck was parked where my car usually went, and Lauren's silver SUV was behind it. Through the front window, I could see boxes stacked in the living room, not mine. Theirs. I sat there for a few seconds with both hands on the steering wheel, reminding myself why I had come. Get my belongings, find my documents, leave. I wasn't there to convince anyone that what they had done was wrong. My mother opened the door before I reached it. She didn't apologize. She just stepped aside and said, "You have until 6. Your father will be home later." I walked past her and headed upstairs. The bedroom door was open. I stopped in the hallway. Someone had changed the bedspread. Derek's jackets hung inside my closet, and 2 of Lauren's boxes were stacked beneath the window where my desk had been. A garment bag hung from the closet door. My bookshelf was half empty. The framed photograph I kept beside my bed was sitting face down on top of one of my boxes. Less than 48 hours earlier, that had still been my room. Now, I felt like I was visiting someone else's. Derek appeared behind me carrying a laundry basket. Hey, he looked uncomfortable, which at least told me he understood this wasn't normal. I didn't know you were coming today. Mom gave me a 2-hour appointment. His face tightened. Tess, did you know they were changing the locks? He put down the basket. I knew we were moving in. That wasn't my question. He looked toward the stairs before answering. Mom said you were already looking for your own place. For a moment, I forgot about the room. She said what? She said you'd been planning to move out anyway. That this just moved the timeline up. I wasn't planning to move out this week, or this month. Derek rubbed the back of his neck. I thought you knew. Rachel knew before I did. That shut him up. I started packing what was left in the dresser. Derek stood there for another few seconds before saying, "For what it's worth, I didn't ask them to throw you out. Did you ask where I was going?" He looked down. That answer was enough. I didn't need Derek to be the mastermind for me to be angry with him. He had spent most of his life accepting help without asking what it cost anyone else. "Mom said you'd still help with the house for a while," he added. I stopped folding a sweater. "She told you that too?" "I mean, I assumed you guys worked it out?" "We didn't work anything out." He frowned, but before he could respond, Mom called up from downstairs asking whether I needed boxes. I said no. I wanted to find one thing before I left: a blue accordion folder I kept in the hall cabinet beside my parents' home office. It wasn't valuable in the usual sense. It contained old insurance papers, copies of household budgets I had helped organize, bank correspondence, and records I'd kept from when I first moved home. I opened the cabinet. The folder wasn't there. I checked behind tax files, then the shelf below. Nothing. "Mom." She appeared in the doorway. "Where's my blue folder?" "What blue folder?" "The accordion folder that was right here." "I don't know. It has my paperwork in it." She crossed her arms. "Then you probably packed it." "I didn't. Tessa, I'm not keeping track of every piece of paper you own." "Did you move anything out of this cabinet?" We cleaned things up for Derek and Lauren. So maybe it got moved. Maybe. Where? Her expression changed just slightly. Not fear, irritation. I don't know. And I really wish you would stop treating this like some kind of investigation. I looked at her. I asked where my folder is. And I said I don't know. I could have accused her of hiding it. A day earlier, I probably would have. Instead, I took out my phone and added the folder to a note listing everything still missing. Fine. What are you doing? Keeping track. She gave a short laugh. Of course you are. I went back upstairs. By 5:30, my car was nearly full. As I carried the last box toward the front door, I heard Mom talking to Derek in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard my name. Then Mom said, "Don't worry about the money. We'll handle it." I kept walking. In the driveway, I put the box down and opened my banking app. The $150 transfer was still paused. Until that moment, I had told myself pausing it was temporary, a way to force a conversation. But I suddenly understood what that meant. I was still treating my own money as something they were entitled to once they gave me a good enough explanation. I opened the recurring payment settings and selected cancel. A warning appeared asking whether I wanted to stop all future transfers. I pressed yes. Then I went through my statements, $11.50 every month, plus the extras Mom occasionally requested. $400 for a plumbing problem. $600 when the electric bill supposedly spiked. $800 toward a repair she said couldn't wait. I did rough math. Over nearly 4 years, regular contributions alone came to more than $50,000. Add the extras and it was closer to 55. I wasn't angry that I had helped. I was angry that the same people who had accepted that help could put my belongings outside and still assume the help would continue. My phone rang before I even left the driveway. "Dad." "Eh?" I answered. "Tessa, what exactly did you stop?" No hello, no question about whether I had managed to collect my things. I looked through the windshield at the house. "My monthly transfer? You cancelled it?" "Yes. Completely. Dad, I don't live there anymore." "That's not what your mother told me." I sat straighter. "What did she tell you?" He hesitated. "She said the arrangement was already settled." "What arrangement?" "That you'd keep contributing through the end of the year, while we got everything reorganized." I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. "I never agreed to that." "Tessa." "No, I need you to hear me. I never had that conversation with Mom. I never promised to pay through December. I didn't even know I was moving out until I found my stuff on the porch." There was silence on the other end, different from the silence after my 12 calls. This one sounded like someone trying to fit 2 pieces together that didn't match. Finally, Dad said, "Your mother told me you two discussed it." "We didn't." "Maybe she thought." "Dad, how do you mistakenly think someone agreed to send you thousands of dollars?" His voice dropped. "Let's not start accusing people. I'm telling you what I did and didn't agree to." "I know." He sounded less certain now. I need to talk to your mother. And I need to talk to you without her." Another pause. "Why?" "Because right now, I don't know which things you actually know, and which things Mom told you I agreed to." He didn't like that. I could hear it in his breathing. But he didn't defend her this time. "Tomorrow morning," he said eventually. "There's a diner near my work. 7:30. "Okay." I ended the call and looked back at the house one last time. Yesterday, I thought my parents had kicked me out because Derek needed my room. That was painful, but simple. Now Derek believed I had volunteered to leave. Dad believed I had promised to keep paying after I left. And Mom seemed to be the only person who knew exactly how those 2 stories were supposed to fit together. I started the car. Losing my room had hurt, but as I drove away, I realized I might be dealing with something worse than favoritism. Someone in my family had been making promises with my money, and apparently I was the last person they thought needed to know. Dad was already sitting in a booth when I reached the diner at 7:28 the next morning. He had a coffee in front of him and kept turning the paper sleeve around the cup with both hands. I slid into the seat across from him and decided before he said anything that I wasn't going to ask whether Mom was angry. I wasn't there to manage her reaction. "I want to make sure we're talking about what you actually know," I said. Dad frowned. "What's that supposed to mean? Yesterday you said Mom told you. I agreed to keep paying through December. I didn't." "Derek said Mom told him. I was already planning to move out. I wasn't, so before we talk about anything else, I need to know what you personally heard from me." He looked down at his coffee. "Nothing about December." "Did I ever tell you I was moving out?" "No." "Did I ever tell you Derek could have my room?" "No." Each answer made something inside me settle into place. Not because it made things better, because confusion was finally becoming information. Dad rubbed his forehead. "Your mother handles most of the household finances, Tess. She has for years. She told me you two had worked out a transition." "What did that transition look like?" "You'd get your own place. Derek and Lauren would stay with us, and your contribution would continue while we adjusted." "And that sounded normal to you?" His expression tightened. "I assumed you agreed. Why didn't you ask me?" He had no quick answer. Finally he said, "Because your mother usually handles these things." That sentence bothered me almost more than anything else he had said. Dad wasn't claiming he had been tricked by some elaborate scheme. He was admitting that not knowing had been convenient. "Where did you think the money was going?" I asked. "Mortgage, utilities, repairs, everything." "Hun Derek? We've helped him here and there." "With what money?" "Or money. Are you sure?" He looked at me then. "What are you saying?" "I don't know yet. That's why I'm asking." Dad leaned back. "Be careful, Tessa." "About what?" "About turning assumptions into accusations." I agree. That surprised him. "So, I'm not accusing anyone. I'm going to look at what I actually paid and what I actually agreed to." "You should probably do the same." I left the diner without feeling better, but for the first time I had a strategy. At work, I spent my lunch break downloading my own bank statements. Nothing private belonging to my parents, nothing I wasn't entitled to see. Just my account, my transfers, my money. That night at Priya's table, I started building a timeline. It was the kind of thing I did every week at work when a vendor invoice didn't match a purchase order. Date, amount, description. What I remembered being told. Priya sat across from me with her laptop, mostly leaving me alone. The regular Thurs 150 payments were easy. The extras were more interesting. $400 in February labeled plumbing, $600 in April after Mom told me utilities had jumped, $750 in June for what she called an urgent house expense, $800 in August, $300 in September. None of those payments had seemed suspicious at the time. Families had expenses, houses broke, bills changed. But when I added Derek's timeline beside mine, something started bothering me. February was when Derek's biggest client delayed paying him. April was when he complained at dinner that his car insurance and rent had both gone up. June was the month Mom mentioned he was 2 payments behind on something, but told me not to worry about it. I couldn't prove my money had gone to him. Money in a household account didn't come with name tags, but the timing was enough to make me ask questions I should have asked earlier. Priya finally looked over. "Find something." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm trying too hard to find something." "What do the numbers say?" "The numbers say Mom asked me for more money whenever Derek was having problems." Priya nodded toward the screen. "Then that's what you know. You don't have to decide what it means yet." That was useful. I highlighted only the facts I could verify. The next evening, Mom called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered. "Dad says you're going through old bank statements," she said. No greeting. "My bank statements." "Why?" "Because I want to understand what I contributed." "You know what you contributed." "I know how much." "I don't always know what the extra payments were for." Her voice changed. Are you seriously auditing us now? I walked slowly down Pryor's block, phone against my ear. I'm asking about my own money. We gave you a home for almost 4 years. And I paid every month. Far below what an apartment would have cost you. Then why didn't we call it rent? Because we're family. Okay. Then why are questions about family money suddenly inappropriate? Because you're trying to make us look like we stole from you. I didn't say that. You didn't have to? I stopped walking. A week earlier, that accusation would have sent me scrambling to reassure her. I would have said, "No, Mom, that's not what I mean." I would have softened everything until she felt comfortable enough to avoid answering. I didn't do it this time. Where did the extra money go? I asked. Into the household. Including helping Derek. This family has enough problems without you auditing everyone, because your feelings are hurt. There it was again. My questions were always the problem, never the thing that caused them. Why does asking where my own money went count as auditing you? She went silent. Then she said, "I'm not having this conversation," and hung up. I stood on the sidewalk staring at the call-ended screen. Oddly, I wasn't angry. I felt clear. If Mom wouldn't answer, I didn't need to force her. I only needed to know what still connected me to the house, and what I had actually authorized. Back at Pryor's apartment, I took a clean sheet of paper and divided it into 3 sections. What I own, what I authorized, what I need to separate. Under the first, I listed the belongings and documents still missing, including the blue folder. Under the second, I wrote monthly household contributions while I lived there. Nothing about December, nothing about continuing after I moved. Under the third, I started listing everything I had forgotten was still connected to that address. Mailing information, a shared purchasing account, a couple of subscriptions, an old emergency contact, automatic payments. It was a boring list. That was exactly why it felt powerful. I wasn't trying to expose my mother. I wasn't trying to punish Derek. I was making sure nobody could make another decision involving me without me knowing. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I let it ring because I was in the middle of writing. A minute later, the voicemail icon appeared. I almost ignored it until I saw the transcription begin with my name. I pressed play. "Hi, Ems Marlowe. This is Nora Bell with Home Lending Services. I'm following up regarding a household income documentation discrepancy connected to a refinance inquiry. We have recurring contribution information associated with your name, and I need to clarify whether that support is expected to continue. Please call me back when you have a moment." I played it again. Then once more. Pryor looked up from across the table. "What?" I didn't answer immediately. My parents' house wasn't mine. I wasn't on their mortgage. I wasn't applying for anything, and I had never told anyone that my monthly payments would continue after I left. I looked down at the 3 columns I had just written. What I authorized. For the first time since finding my belongings on the porch, the question wasn't why my parents had kicked me out. It was why anyone involved in refinancing their house believed my money was still part of it. I called Nora Bell from my car the next morning, 20 minutes before I was due at work. I had already listened to her voicemail twice more, mostly to make sure I wasn't turning one vague sentence into something bigger than it was. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Home Lending Services, this is Nora." "Hi, this is Tessa Marlowe. You left me a voicemail yesterday about recurring household contributions." There was a brief pause while she pulled something up. "Yais. Thank you for returning my call. Before we go any further, I need to understand why my name is involved. I'm not on my parents' mortgage." "Correct," she said. "And because you're not an applicant, I can't discuss the details of their application with you. What I can clarify is the information associated with you." That actually made me trust her more. "Okay." Documentation submitted for the household includes a recurring contribution connected to your name. We're verifying whether that support is expected to continue. I gripped the steering wheel. How far into the future? I can't discuss how it affects the application. I only need to establish whether you have made a commitment to continue those payments. No. Saying it felt almost absurdly easy. I haven't? Have the payments ended? Yes. I lived with my parents and voluntarily contributed $150 a month while I lived there. I don't live there anymore. Nora paused. And you have not agreed to continue making that contribution? No. Definitely not. All right. I'll note that clarification. I may need you to confirm it in writing. She didn't tell me who had provided the information. She didn't accuse my mother of anything. She didn't even say someone had done something improper. But she didn't need to. By the time I ended the call, one fact was clear. Somebody had built a financial assumption around money I had never promised to keep sending. At work, I opened the written confirmation Nora sent me. It was short. I read every line anyway. All I needed to confirm was that my previous household contributions were voluntary and that I had made no commitment to continue them. My cursor hovered over the reply button. For a few seconds, the old reflex came back. If I sent this, would my parents lose whatever refinancing option they were pursuing? Would Dad blame me? Would Derek? What if the house really was in trouble? Then I thought about Mom's note on the front door. Derek needs the room more than you do. We'll explain later. They had made their decision before explaining anything to me. I wasn't making a decision for them now. I was correcting one about myself. I typed the confirmation and sent it. Less than an hour later, my phone vibrated on my desk. Mom. I let it ring, then again, then a third time. A text appeared. Call me immediately. Another followed 30 seconds later. What did you tell them? I stared at those 5 words. I had never told Mom Nora contacted me. I hadn't mentioned refinancing to anyone except Priya. Yet Mom knew exactly what my actions had touched. I stepped into the stairwell and typed back. I told them the truth about my money. Mom called before I could put my phone away. This time I answered. What did you do? She asked. I clarified that I never agreed to keep sending Bol $750 after I moved out. You had no business interfering with our refinance. Someone put my contribution into it. It's household income. It was money I voluntarily sent while I lived in the household. You lived here for years at a fraction of what you would have paid elsewhere. And now I don't live there. Her voice sharpened. You're deliberately making this difficult because you're angry about Derek. No. I'm making sure nobody promises my money for me. Nobody promised your money? Then my clarification shouldn't matter. Silence. It lasted just long enough for me to know I had finally asked a question she couldn't redirect. You have no idea how complicated this is, she said. Then explain it. Not while you're behaving like this. She hung up. A week earlier, that would have sent me into a spiral. This time I slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned to work. I had a vendor call in 6 minutes. For once, Mom's refusal to answer didn't stop me from moving forward. Dad called that evening. He sounded more confused than angry. Your mother says you blew up the refinance. I corrected information about my own contribution. What refinance? Tessa. I stopped halfway through carrying a box across Priya's living room. You don't know? I knew she'd been looking at ways to lower the mortgage payment. I didn't know anything had reached the point where they were verifying income. Dad, why was my money being counted as continuing household support? I don't know. You told me Mom said I committed through December. I know what I told you? His voice was quieter now. I'm starting to think I need to see exactly what she submitted. I sat down on the edge of the couch. Then asked her. Can't you just tell me what the lender said? They didn't tell me anything about your application. They asked whether I promised future payments. I said no. Could you call them back and tell them you'll help temporarily? There it was again. Fix it first. Understand it later. No. I'm not asking you to pay forever. You're asking me to promise money so a financial plan I wasn't told about can work. I'm asking you not to make things harder. Dad, I didn't create the numbers. He went quiet. Ask Mom to show you everything, I said. Not what she says the numbers mean. The actual numbers. After we hung up, I opened the list I had made the night before. What I need to separate. The monthly transfer was already gone, but there were smaller connections I had forgotten about. My mailing address, a shared household purchasing profile Mom sometimes used for bulk orders, 2 subscriptions charged to my card, my parents' address attached to an old savings account. Dad still listed as an emergency contact at work. None of those things were dramatic. That was the point. I changed them one by one. I removed my card from the shared purchasing account, updated my mailing address to Prior's temporarily, moved the subscriptions, changed passwords where I needed to. By the time I finished, nearly 2 hours had passed. Prior looked over from the kitchen. How does it feel? Boring. She laughed. That's probably healthy. I looked at the confirmation emails filling my inbox. Actually, it feels good. For 4 years, my life had become tangled into that house in tiny ways I barely noticed. Untangling it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like finding out where I ended and my family began. The next day after work, I walked out of the building carrying my laptop bag and saw my mother standing beside my car. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She looked composed, almost businesslike. That worried me more. We need to talk, she said. About what? About what you've done to the refinance. About your father. About Derek. She stepped closer. And about whether you really want to be responsible for what happens next. I looked at her for a moment. A few days earlier, that sentence would have frightened me. Now I heard something else inside it. Mom wasn't ignoring my calls anymore. She had come to find me. And for the first time since I saw those boxes on the porch, she needed something from me more than I needed an explanation from her. Mom didn't ask whether I had somewhere permanent to live. She didn't mention the boxes or the locks. She stood beside my car with her purse tucked under one arm and said, the refinance was supposed to lower the mortgage payment by almost $400 a month. I put my laptop bag in the back seat. Okay. Your father's hours haven't gone back to what they were. Property taxes went up. Insurance went up. Derek's situation happened at the worst possible time. Her voice was controlled, and for once she wasn't pretending there was no real problem. There was. My parents weren't secretly rich. Dad's income had dropped. The house cost more to maintain than it had 4 years earlier. Derek had lost a major client. None of that was invented. I understand the house is expensive, I said. Then you understand why what you did matters. What I did was tell them I never promised future payments. And now they have to reassess everything. Then they should reassess it using the money you actually have. Her jaw tightened. You say that like we were stealing from you. I didn't say that. You keep hiding behind technical language. Contributions. Authorization. Verification. We're your parents, Tessa, and I'm your daughter. You still changed the locks. She looked away toward the office building. You were going to move eventually. That's different from deciding for me. You're 31. Exactly. That seemed to irritate her more than if I had shouted. She folded her arms. Fine, you want everything spelled out. We helped you when you needed somewhere affordable to live. You saved thousands by staying with us. Now the family needs help, and suddenly every dollar has conditions attached. That one landed because there was truth in it. I had benefited from living at home. Even with $1,150 a month, I had paid less than I would have for a decent apartment. I had saved money. My parents had helped me. For a moment, I wondered whether I was rewriting 4 years of mutual support into exploitation because I was angry about how it ended. Mom saw the hesitation. Restore the contribution for 6 months, she said. What? 6 months? That gives us time to stabilize the mortgage and gives Derek time to get his income back up. Your father and I will help with the deposit on an apartment for you. Then everyone starts fresh. It was clever. She wasn't asking me to come home, she was offering something concrete. 6 months of payments would be $6,900. An apartment deposit would be far less than that. But my brain still started calculating how quickly I could move out of Pryor's place. You already counted my money in the refinance without asking me. Because you had been contributing for years. That's not the same as promising 6 more months. No, but I thought you would understand. There it was. Not permission. Assumption. I need to think, I said. Mom's expression softened immediately. That's all I'm asking. Then, as she turned to leave, she added, Derek never made us feel like helping family was some kind of contract negotiation. I watched her walk toward her car. That last sentence did what she intended. For about 10 minutes. Then it bothered me for a different reason. Derek, according to Mom, Derek understood family obligation better than I did. According to Derek, he thought I had volunteered to leave and keep helping. I texted him before I drove away. Can we talk without Mom? He replied 20 minutes later. We met the next evening at a coffee shop halfway between my office and my parents' house. Derek arrived looking exhausted. Mom says you killed the refinance, he said before he even sat down. Mom says a lot of things. Did you? I told the lender I never agreed to keep paying after I moved out. He frowned. Paying what? I opened my banking app and showed him the transfer history, $11.50 every month, plus extras. He looked at the screen, then at me. I knew you helped with bills. Did you know Mom was treating that money as continuing support after I left? No. Did you know the refinance depended on it? I didn't even know it depended on outside money. Mom said they were refinancing because rates and payments had changed, and they could restructure things. Where did you think the money helping you came from? His expression hardened. I didn't ask them for your money. That's not what I asked. He leaned back. For once, I didn't rescue him from the discomfort. Finally, he said, I thought they had savings. Some of the extra money, Mom, asked me for lines up pretty closely with months you were short. You think she was taking money from you and giving it to me? I think I don't know, and that's the problem. Derek stared at the table. She told me you wanted your own place anyway. She told Dad I agreed to keep paying through December. His eyes came up. She told me you volunteered to move early because Lauren and I needed the room. I found out from a note taped to the door. He looked genuinely embarrassed. Not transformed. Not innocent. Just uncomfortable in a way I had rarely seen him. I should have asked you, he said. Yes. He flinched slightly at how quickly I answered. I'm not saying I handled it right. You didn't. Okay. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I told him about Mom's 6-month proposal. He gave a short, humorless laugh. She told me you were refusing to help at all. She offered to help with my apartment deposit if I pay almost $7,000 over 6 months. Derek rubbed both hands over his face. This is insane? No. That's what's bothering me. It actually makes sense if everyone believes a different version. He looked at me. I counted them off. Dad thinks I committed through December. You think I volunteered to leave. I was told you needed the room and that I was adaptable. Mom is the only person who seems to know all 3 versions. Derek went quiet. Then he said, Your blue folder. What about it? The one you were looking for. I saw it yesterday. I sat forward. Where? In the cabinet in Mom's home office. Not the hall cabinet, the locked-looking one under her desk. Did you open it? No. The cabinet was open because she was sorting papers. I saw your name on the tab. The next afternoon, Derek called me from the driveway. Mom was out grocery shopping. Dad was at work. Derek had asked her earlier about the folder, and she had told him it was hold household paperwork. He handed it to me beside his truck. If it's yours, take it. Inside were old budget sheets I recognized, copies of contribution notes, and pages in Mom's handwriting. Nothing said, I secretly used Tessa's money. Nothing that convenient. But one page had columns of dates and amounts. My extra transfers appeared on the left. On the right were household shortfalls, and several entries marked with Derek's name: rent gap, insurance, car, client delay. Not every dollar matched. Enough did. I looked at Derek. His face had gone still. I didn't know, he said. I believed that he hadn't known the details. But that didn't erase the years he had accepted rescue without asking questions. You didn't want to know, I said. He looked down at the page. After a long moment, he nodded. That mattered more than an apology would have. I took pictures of the pages that related to my transfers and put the folder under my arm. Mom's 6-month offer no longer tempted me. The problem had never been whether my family sometimes needed help. The problem was that my help had become part of a system nobody thought required my consent. And now, for the first time, Derek could see the system too. We met at my parents' dining room table 2 nights later. No cousins, no neighbors, no family group chat. Just Mom, Dad, Derek, and me. I wanted it that way because I wasn't interested in embarrassing anyone. I wanted answers, and more importantly, I wanted the decisions involving my life to stop being made in rooms where I wasn't present. Mom sat at the head of the table with her arms folded. Dad had a stack of statements beside him. Derek looked like he would rather be anywhere else. I put copies of my transfer history and the relevant pages from the blue folder in front of me. Mom looked at them and sighed. So this really is an audit? No, I said. There are 3 things I want to discuss. My money, what I actually agreed to, and what happens from now on. You're making this sound like a business meeting. That might be easier. At work, people don't usually promise my money without asking me. Dad closed his eyes for a second. Mom's mouth tightened before she could answer. Dad pushed one of his statements toward the center of the table. I went through the accounts. Mom turned toward him. Martin. I should have done it years ago. His voice wasn't loud. That made the room quieter. He tapped several lines he had highlighted. There were transfers to Derek I didn't know about. Derek leaned forward. How much? It wasn't one giant amount, Dad said. That's the point. A few hundred here, rent help there, insurance, car payment. Then money moved around to cover household bills afterward. Mom shook her head. Because that's what families do. We move money where it's needed. With whose permission? I asked. You gave us money for the household. Yes, while I lived here, and you benefited from living here. I've never denied that. I slid my own statements forward. I paid worse $150 every month. When you asked for extra money for a repair or utilities, I sent it because I believed that was what it was for. If you had said, Derek is short on rent, will you give us $600 to help him? I could have said yes or no. Would you have said yes? Mom asked. Sometimes, probably. She stared at me as if that answer annoyed her more than no would have. Then what difference does it make? The difference is that it would have been my decision. Nobody spoke for a moment. That was the part Mom still seemed unable to understand. She kept arguing that the outcome might have been the same, as though consent was irrelevant if she believed I would eventually agree. Dad looked down at the handwritten page from the folder. Elaine, why did you tell me Tessa had committed through December? Because she had been contributing consistently for years. That's not what I asked. I looked at Dad. It was the first time I had heard him use my exact approach. Mom noticed too. I was trying to keep this family stable, she said. Derek was losing work. Lawrence Lee's situation was becoming impossible. Your hours were down. We had a chance to restructure the mortgage. Tessa was doing well. I made decisions based on what we had. You made decisions based on what I had, I said. Or, please, you saved money living here too? Yes. We both benefited from the arrangement. Then you ended my side of it and kept yours. Derek shifted in his chair. Mom, did you tell the lender Tess was going to keep paying? I provided a record of household income. That's not an answer, he said. Mom turned on him. You are the last person who should be criticizing how I kept this family afloat. Derek's face reddened. I know you helped me. Do you? She asked. Because apparently everyone has decided that helping you was some kind of crime. Nobody said that. He looked at the pages again. But I thought the money came from you and Dad. I didn't know Tess was covering gaps after you helped me. It was household money. She wasn't in the household after you threw her out. Mom pushed her chair back slightly. We did not throw her out. We accelerated something that was going to happen anyway. I almost laughed. I found my clothes on the porch. Because you would have argued for 3 days. Maybe I deserved 3 days. Dad rubbed his forehead. Lane, stop. She stared at him. He looked exhausted, but he didn't back down. You should have talked to her. Mom's expression changed then, not remorse exactly. More like disbelief that the people she had spent years managing were no longer accepting her version automatically. Derek broke the silence. I'm going to take the operations job. Mom turned toward him. What operations job? The one I told you about last week. Full time. I can keep some freelance clients on the side. You said the salary was too low. It's lower than I want. It's still a paycheck. You don't have to panic because Tessa is angry. Derek shook his head. That's the problem. I've spent years not panicking because somebody always fixed it. He glanced at me. I didn't ask enough questions. It wasn't a dramatic apology, and I didn't need one. No, I said. You didn't, he nodded. I'll contribute while Lauren and I are here, and we'll start looking for another place once I'm settled at the job. Mom looked between us. So now everyone has a plan except me? You have a plan, Dad said quietly. It just has to use the money we actually have. That was the moment the balance in the room changed. Not because anyone defeated Mom. Not because she confessed to some secret scheme. Her plan had simply depended on 3 assumptions. Derek would keep accepting help. Dad would keep letting her manage the numbers without questions. And I would keep paying because I always had. All 3 assumptions were gone. Mom turned to me. Fine. What exactly do you want? A week earlier? I would have had a list of emotional answers. I wanted her to admit she had chosen Derek over me. I wanted Dad to explain why he had watched it happen. I wanted Derek to understand what it felt like to see his clothes hanging in my closet. But none of those things could be forced. I don't want my room back, I said. Mom blinked. Then what? My contribution is over. Permanently. Nobody represents my income as household support. My payment information stays off family accounts. I'll pick up the last of my belongings this week, and if we have a relationship after this, it can't depend on whether I'm willing to pay for something. So that's it. Financially, yes. After everything we've done for you. I felt the old guilt rise automatically, but it didn't control the next sentence. You helped me. I helped you. That doesn't give either of us permanent ownership of the other person's money. Mom looked at Dad as if she expected him to intervene. He didn't. She looked at Derek. He didn't either. I gathered my papers and stood. Mom followed me into the front hall. For a second, we were back near the same door where she had taped that note. So you're really going to leave us with this? She asked. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. The sentence was so revealing that I almost missed it. She hadn't asked whether I was really leaving them. She had asked whether I was leaving them with this. The mortgage, the budget, Derek's problems, the consequences of decisions I hadn't been allowed to make. Which part of this did I create, Mom? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. You made a household plan without me, I said. No, you need one that works without my money. I opened the door myself and walked out. 1 week later, a leasing agent dropped a small brass key into my palm. My new apartment was half the size of my parents' house, and the rent made me wince. I didn't care. I stood outside the door for a moment, slid the key into the lock, and turned it. It opened on the first try. The apartment was smaller than the living room at my parents' house, and when I stood in the middle of it, surrounded by boxes, I could almost touch the kitchen counter and the back of the couch without moving. The bedroom had one narrow closet. The bathroom cabinet leaned slightly to the left. Somewhere upstairs, someone seemed determined to learn the drums. I loved it, not because it was perfect, but because every key on my ring opened a door I was actually allowed to walk through. Priya helped me unpack that first weekend. She held up a chipped coffee mug and asked, "Keep or throw away?" "Keep." "You've said that about everything." "I've had enough people deciding what I need." She laughed and put it in the cabinet. The apartment cost more than staying with my parents had, obviously. Once I added utilities and groceries, my monthly expenses jumped enough to make me uncomfortable. But for the first time, discomfort felt honest. I knew exactly what I was paying for. There were no mysterious extras, no emergency requests that somehow arrived whenever Derek was short. No family budget that depended on assumptions nobody had discussed with me. The refinance didn't disappear because I refused to participate. It simply had to be reassessed using my parents' actual finances. Dad told me later that they had to change their plans. They cut some expenses, delayed a few projects around the house, and started looking seriously at where their money went each month. The house didn't vanish. Nobody ended up homeless. There was no dramatic collapse. They just had to live inside a budget that no longer included me as an invisible backup plan. About 3 weeks after I moved, Dad asked me to breakfast. He was already seated when I arrived, just like the morning we first compared what Mom had told each of us. This time, there were no statements spread across the table. "I owe you an apology," he said after I sat down. I waited. I had learned not to help people finish difficult sentences. "Not just because your mother changed the locks," he continued. "I should have stopped that, but I also let her handle everything because it was easier for me." That was more specific than I expected. I kept telling myself she was better with the household stuff. Really, I liked not having to ask questions as long as the bills got paid. "Heaven when you didn't know how they were getting paid." He nodded. "Especially then." I appreciated that he didn't ask me to forgive him immediately. He didn't say Mom had meant well as if intention erased everything. He simply told me he had started reviewing the accounts himself. He and Mom were going through expenses together now. "Derek's paying rent," he added. I raised my eyebrows. "Actual rent?" Dad smiled slightly. Actual rent. Derek had taken the operations job. It wasn't glamorous, and according to him, the salary was painfully normal. But it was steady. He kept a few freelance clients on evenings and weekends. A month later, he called me while I was assembling a bookshelf and told me he and Lauren were saving for another apartment. "I should have asked more questions," he said. Back then, I knew exactly what he meant. "Yeah, I think I got used to Mom fixing things." "You did," he laughed once. "You're really not going to make this easy for me, are you?" Would that help? Probably not. That was about as close as Derek and I came to a dramatic reconciliation. Honestly, I preferred it that way. He hadn't suddenly become a different person. Neither had I. We were just starting to have a relationship where his emergencies weren't automatically my responsibility. Mom took longer. For the first month, most of her messages were practical. Did I want an old lamp? Had I taken all my winter clothes? A piece of mail had arrived. I answered when I wanted to. Not instantly. That alone felt strange. Then one Saturday morning, she called and asked whether I could cover part of a repair because Dad's truck needed work at the same time. The old answer rose to my lips before I could stop it. "How much?" Instead, I asked, "Is this an emergency?" "The repair needs to be done." "I mean an emergency for me?" Silence. "I don't understand why you have to phrase everything like that now." "Because I'm not contributing to the house anymore. It would only be a few $100. Then you and Dad need to decide how to handle it." Her tone cooled. "Family helps each other, Tessa. Sometimes, when they choose to." She started to say something about everything they had done for me. I interrupted, not loudly. Mom, if this turns into guilt, I'm going to end the call. Another silence. A few months earlier, she would have kept going until I apologized for upsetting her. This time she stopped. Fine, she said. I'll talk to your father. Okay? After we hung up, I waited for the guilt. I walked around the apartment, washed a coffee cup, checked my phone. Nothing. That surprised me more than anything else. I could say no and continue with my day. Nobody had to turn pale. Nobody had to beg. Nobody had to lose everything for me to finally understand that a boundary was working. A few months after I moved, I sat at my kitchen counter reviewing my budget. At the bottom of the screen was a savings transfer I had created after signing the lease. The amount was $150, the exact amount that had once left my account every month for my parents' household, now moved automatically into an account with one purpose: my future. The first few deposits had mostly rebuilt what moving had cost me. After that, the balance started climbing. I thought about Nora's voicemail sometimes. For a while, I told myself that message had changed everything. In one sense, it had. Without it, I might not have understood how deeply my family had started treating my contribution as something permanent. But the voicemail hadn't rescued me. Nora hadn't exposed some giant secret. She had simply asked whether I had agreed to something. The answer was no. The real change had happened earlier, on Pryor's couch, when I looked at 12 unanswered calls and decided not to make the 13th. For most of my life, being the responsible one meant answering first, paying first, adjusting first, and asking questions later. I thought that was what made me valuable to my family. Now I knew being loved and being useful were not the same thing. My parents were still my parents. Derek was still my brother. I hadn't erased them from my life. I had simply stopped paying for my place in theirs. And sometimes I still wonder how different everything would have been if Mom had opened that door instead of taping a note to it. But maybe the better question is this: if the people closest to you only respect your boundary after you finally enforce it, how long were they benefiting from you not having one?